Here we go.
Well, welcome to AI World. You have Jarrett Brelsford here representing Mesa Services. I'm joined by a couple of guys that I think I've known for about 39 years now, roughly, give or take.
Probably so.
But yeah, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Clay Brelsford with Bass Engineering, a Mesa company today.
I'm Jim Bass. I'm retired from AI. Used to do a little development work on PCS.
Yep. Just a little.
Just a little.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, while we're kicking it off here, clearly I don't have a script or anything, but why don't you go ahead and just kind of talk a little bit about, if you can remember that far back, when y'all met and how you met. What's your earliest memory of Jim Bass?
I'll take a shot at it. I'll take a shot at it. And the way I remember it, Jim and I have known each other for we went to grade school together, and but in high school is really and through scouting we knew each other a lot. But I remember very clearly a physics class I think we were in, and we were at these lab tables, and there were four of us at the table, and we were actually, everyone was talking about what we were going to do for a summer job. And so I'm talking to the guy next to me, and I'll probably go back to work for the city again. And Jim is sitting across the table, and he said, "Hey, my dad needs a strong back and a weak mind. I think you probably qualify for that. Why don't you go talk to him?" And I knew his dad because of scouting.
Yep.
And so I'm eternally grateful for that opportunity because it did turn into a career in corrosion control. But I got the job.
No, but hold on. You mentioned your other buddy was working for the city. I've heard stories about you and your time with the city. Was that pre-Bass or after your first round of shoveling coke?
No, that was pre-Bass. So, yeah,
okay.
I started cleaning public restrooms.
And I think you weren't really interested in doing that for another summer.
No.
I had
a career.
Yeah, I felt like I had seen that, and maybe you get a lot of time to think when you're out there by yourself cleaning public restrooms, and you think about your life and what maybe
Choices you've made.
Maybe what else could you do? And so shoveling coke breeze was actually a pretty good step up.
Yeah.
Shoveling coke breeze, tamping coke breeze, right?
Coke breeze. So
digging ditches.
So from there, I did an interview with his dad, and I got a red hard hat.
Rookie hard hat.
Red hard hat. I was pretty proud of it. And but we wouldn't start until the summer when we got out of school. But Jim said, "Hey, there's a little opportunity, if you want to get ahead in life." And so when we meet down at the railroad tracks, we've got a trainload car of coke breeze to unload. And I thought, that sounds great. I have no idea. And so I'll let Jim pick it up from there.
So generally we would get three of us, me and Clay and a friend of ours, Lowell. And we got paid $90 to empty, I think it was 40 tons of coke breeze. And it would generally take about 3 days after school. And we'd work 3 or 4 hours, after school each day and unload the coke breeze. And so we each wound up with $30, and we thought that was great.
So $10 a day.
Yes.
For 4 hours.
1975.
Yeah, 75. Yeah.
$2 an hour all in.
Yeah.
That's about where I started it. Yes. To be quite honest.
So,
dang.
So that's where it started.
Yeah.
And so from there, Jim and I and the friend, Lowell, and so we went to work in the summer.
Y'all think, where is Lowell? Do you think he's going to be listening?
I hope he will.
Okay.
I hope he will, because he was a big part of the story.
We'll have to send him a link.
Yeah. Yeah. So we went to work in the summer, and the project that Jim had lured me in on was actually a magnesium anode installation. And back in that time, a lot of people have heard of hotspot surveys. And so these were old crude oil lines that were laid in the early days of the East Texas oil boom. So
Bare and pitted.
they were bare, and they followed the creek lines because the early days there were no pumps, so they just used gravity to move the crude oil, and so the pipelines we worked on followed the creek lines. So you can imagine summertime in East Texas, and you're down in these creek bottoms and following the pipeline, and so we had various jobs, but we had a truck that your dad had given us, and I think had promised us that the truck was going to be destroyed after.
We probably couldn't hurt it.
Yeah, well, it was in that kind of shape.
Yeah.
So he could give it to 17, 18-year-old young men and say, here's your job.
Yeah.
And so we would go pick up the magnesium anodes from a warehouse, bring them to the job site, and then we would also flag the locations.
Yeah.
Well, I got the job of working with the inspector, and at that time I didn't wear my red hard hat, and so we
I don't
worked.
think you wore FRs either.
No. So we were in jeans. Most of the time we didn't have a shirt on. Most of the time, at most, we might have a ball cap on. And but my job was to go with the inspector, and he had a Nielsen Model 715 locator. And he, of course, had the receiver, and my job was to man the transmitter, get it set, and then follow him. And when he kicked the dirt, I put a flag down. And that was pretty quiet communication. I quickly learned that when he kicks the dirt, you put a flag down. Well, at some point, he said, go bring the transmitter forward. And so me, being a young guy, I want to make a good impression. I start trucking back down the right of way. So I'm running down the right of way, and it's summer and it's East Texas, and I'm wet with sweat. He neglected to tell me that I needed to turn the transmitter off before I picked up the ground rod. And of course, he's watching. And I reached down and grabbed the ground rod, and I'm pretty sure all of my hair stood straight out. I must look like a cartoon. And so I'm trying to recover from that and figure out what has happened. And I gathered everything up eventually and trotted back up the right of way, only to have the inspector look at me and say, I bet you'll never do that again. And so first safety lesson that I had. And you learn by doing. So, but Jim, I know you must have some memories of that summer.
Or summers. How many summers did y'all do?
Yeah. So I definitely have memories of that summer, and but then that continued really for about 4 summers in a row. We worked all that summer. We went down to A&M, and we were roommates together. And by the end of the summer, going off to college looked pretty good. But then by the end of 2 semesters and 2 sets of finals and everything, going back to work looked really good. So we repeated this cycle for about 4 years, where we couldn't wait to get to work in the spring, and we couldn't wait to get back to school in the fall. Is that pretty close?
That's really accurate.
And,
really accurate.
During that time, we installed a lot of deep ground beds, conventional beds. We just tank anodes.
Tank anodes. We traveled the country. We mentioned Lowell. And so, again, you have to remember at that time, we're living on the road a lot. And so at that particular time, the foreman on the crew was responsible for choosing the motel. But there was only a set amount of dollars that were given out for that.
That's right.
And it wasn't a very big stack.
And it wasn't a big stack of money. So the foreman would always shop for the cheapest motel room.
Because they're trying to make money off of this small stack.
Oh, yeah.
And so to help with that, we were told that the college boys would all room together.
That's right.
So we would be 3 of us in a room. There was generally a rollaway bed involved. And I can promise you, whoever got the rollaway was going to get folded up in it during the night, and the latch latched. And it was going to
Just
happen.
part of it.
It was going to happen.
Because we
Was
weren't
this
very
like
smart.
a rock, paper, scissors thing? Or?
No, I'm not sure how we decided that, but everyone got a turn in the rollaway, and I know every one of us were folded up in it at some point.
Yeah. And that sounds, again, eerily familiar to some of my early days at Bass. And the same type of motels that you had put me through.
Yeah, and one of the most notable, I think, was Stella's Wildcatter.
Stella's Wildcatter in Jenna, Louisiana.
Yeah. And
I don't know if Stella's is still in business.
yeah, cinder block walls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So tell me about, so y'all did this all through college. At some point, y'all had to make the decision of, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life?
Yeah. So I'll let Clay talk about that first, because Clay was able to complete college in 4 years, and it took me about 4 more. And so he
by
got
choice.
By choice.
Well, I don't know. They said you're not quite ready to leave here, and so I had to stick around, and so Clay got to make the first decision.
Yeah. So it came time to explore permanent employment opportunities, and so being a good Texas A&M engineering graduate, we went through the whole interview process, and one of the interesting stories that came from that, at the time, there was a company called Amoco Pipeline, and we had done work for Amoco Pipeline, and the inspector had I was going to interview with Amoco Pipeline for a job. I was going to fly to Chicago, Illinois, and apply for that. And the inspector had actually put in a good word for me. And so when I got to the interview, they said, "Well, yeah, we know you're here, and you know you're interviewing for a job in our corrosion control department, but we really want to. We've heard good things about you and your experience in the industry, and we'd like to make you head of our corrosion control department." And I thought, oh my Lord, what has he told them? I shovel coke breeze. I put anodes in the ground. And so from that, I was scared to death. Number one, it's like they have no idea how little I do know, how little I do know.
Yeah.
And but anyway, went through the whole interview process, interviewed for a lot of companies, but my love was Bass Engineering. It was this perfect mix of the technical, the science, the get to go play outside, kick around in the dirt, and solve problems. And so,
how much of it was that it was home? That was Longview, Texas? And
No.
Did Longview, Texas have a hold of you?
No,
Okay.
not at all. As a matter
Sorry,
of fact,
Longview, if you're listening.
no, not at all. In fact, my now wife, at the time, she was my girlfriend. I had an opportunity to go to work for ARCO, and they wanted me to go to Alaska, and that was my first choice. And but
That would have been different.
yeah, and but
For me.
my girlfriend, I think maybe fiance at that point, but she said, "Well, if you do that, you're going by yourself," and that influenced my decision. And so I ended up with my second choice, Bass Engineering, and it's again, I'm grateful for the opportunity.
What year was that?
1980. I would have been doing the interviews in 1980 and went to work January 4, 1981.
There you go.
So then about 4 years later, when they finally said that I had accomplished a college degree.
He's being rather humble.
Very humble.
There's a master's degree and a doctorate in engineering that happened along the way.
Within those 4 years?
During this time. Yeah. So I had to decide then what I wanted to do. And, I looked at different things, but ultimately I was the same way, Clay. My love was Bass Engineering, Dad's company. I always figured I'd go back. So went back and started working, and I was going to do. And while I was in graduate school, I had done some work for a company where I wrote software on PCs, and so
What was a PC then? What was a personal computer?
It was a big box that ran really slowly, and it had a screen with dots about the size of my finger on it.
Made a lot of noise.
Made a lot of noise. It had generally floppy drives, and then
Coffee with Jared and Clay.
yeah, hey, it's Mr.
See, I
Hamlin.
told you that this would be stress free for you,
Yeah,
Bass.
yeah. So anyway, so I went to work and at Bass Engineering, and I was going to design ground beds and do stuff like that. And one of our customers said, "Hey, we just bought this disc, and it's called D-Base, and I was wondering if you can write us a software application to track our corrosion records."
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, "Let me get back to you." So I went and got out a magazine. That's how we did things then. And I read an article on D-Base. And I said, "Yeah, I can do that." So we went back to them and said, "Yeah, we can do that." So we got their disc, installed the D-Base, and 6 weeks later, we had the first very basic version of what is now PCS, and they started using it.
And we had a huge marketing department that we worked with at the time.
Me and Clay.
Yeah, and so we had to come up with a name for this thing. So again, being engineers, we name things for what they do.
Yeah.
So we came up with the just grab you by the face title of Cathodic Protection Data Manager.
Yeah, CPDM.
CPDM.
I like it.
So,
Yeah.
so that's where the name came from. I think it took us about 10 minutes to come up with that.
And then,
And
and then I have this image still of the newspaper article of you guys in that top corner office with one of those air conditioning style desktop computers.
Yeah.
And there was a big article. I'm assuming that was probably a week or two after you did
Probably
that.
somewhere in that time, and so we would.
You guys were on top of the world. Longview News Journal was in.
Exactly. And so we completed that application. Somewhere along the way, we got an article in the paper, and then, well, we hit the road. And we would, at NACE shows, we would set up our big computer and we would show people what we had done. And, eventually somebody would say, "Well, that looks kind of interesting. Why don't you come meet us at our office and show the group?"
Mm-hmm.
So Clay and I would hit the road, and we literally were rolling the computer on carts and set up in their conference room, and we would demo it. And slowly, very slowly, one client at a time, we would get, bring another client on board. And the first 4 or 5 years, every client was a custom application. They showed us what they wanted, and we wrote an application specifically for them to meet, their data management needs. And then somewhere around, this started in 1985. Around 1990, we were getting enough customers that we said, we need to standardize this. So then we had our first, what we called the standard CPDM, and it kept growing from there. And go ahead.
interesting sidelight is Jim mentions the travel. So Jim always had an interest in learning to
There
fly.
you go.
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to transition into that.
So
You just did it. So thank
He
you.
he always had an interest in flying. There was another young man that worked in the group, and he too wanted to learn to fly.
Yep.
So Jim and this gentleman went and took flying lessons, and so of course they really excited about that. And Jim got his VFR rating, visual flight rules. Then he went on and got his IFR rating. Then he bought half interest in a Cherokee 6, which is a 6-place plane, which is a pretty good sized plane to just fly around the country
For a private plane.
for a
Yeah.
private plane.
Gregg County.
But it was
Yeah.
a single engine, 6-place plane. So then the travel became wheel the PC out to the plane, throw it in the
Make
back,
sure it's balanced.
crawl in the plane, and off we would go to wherever we needed to go.
Tulsa,
And so Jim's
Kansas
piloting,
City.
I'm riding right seat. So in that day and time, you had sectionals, and sectionals are like a road map. But when you unfold them, they take up the whole cockpit. And so he's basically putting me through ground school flying right seat while he's piloting the plane. And So a lot of our flights, a lot of our travels were in November 17286. I still remember the tail
That's
number.
it.
There you go.
And so here we went, and a lot of good adventures
Yeah.
that go with that. There's a lot of stories about lightning and storms and night travel. There were a lot of flights at night
Coming home
Coming
and
home.
coming
or
home,
going out. Yeah.
and
So this was 1980. Again, well, somewhere around 1985 to 1987.
Yeah. I learned to fly about 87, 88.
Okay.
So, so then, so it continued to be Clay and Jim,
Yeah.
the marketing sales department. Jim was the development and support department.
Yeah.
Eventually we hired a couple of developers but then in the mid 90s, man named Mike Glovin, who lived in Denver, Colorado, and worked for Trigon Engineering, approached me and said, "Hey, I've got this integrity management software, and you've got this CPDM thing, and everywhere I go, my customers are saying, y'all's two applications need to work together." So he said, maybe we could just form a company and get our two applications working together. So we formed Bass Trigon. Trigon spun off the software part. Bass Engineering spun off the software part.
Clever again.
Just a name,
Just a generating machine.
Yes,
guys.
I mean, engineers, coming up with names. So, and so, we thought we knew what marketing was, but we found out down the road, didn't have a clue. So anyway, so we formed Bass Trigon, and the product, started growing more because Mike was, helping with the, sales and stuff. And then along about 1999, Mike's vision was to grow this a little bit, sell it, and then, keep growing it. And so we sold it. We sold Bass Trigon to Corpro. And this probably wasn't my parents' favorite move, being Corpro was an intense competitor of Bass Engineering. And so we had to have some long discussions about how this could be okay.
Yeah. Yep.
And so Corpro, we continued to grow. We, became a Corpro company, and Corpro had this guy that they had hired as a salesman, and his name was Steve Hamblin. And Mike said, "Jim, I want you to meet this guy, Steve Hamblin." He said, he's selling anodes and stuff for Corpro, and he'd like a little bit something different to sell. And he said, "I think he could really help us." So, I sat down with Steve. He insulted me about 14 times during the first conversation. I said, "Yeah, he sounds like our guy,
It's perfect.
Perfect. Yeah. I'm not sure about this, but Mike, if you think this is going to work, let's go, you know?"
Yeah.
And Steve and I start traveling. And so at first Steve becomes proficient. By this time we had the Allegro field computer, and we had, gone through a couple of iterations of it. And he got really interested in the Allegro, learned all about it. So the first thing he really started selling was the Allegros. And then, as time went on, I went on all the sales calls with him initially, and he became very proficient at PCS. And eventually he decided I didn't need to come along because sometimes I got in the way of the story. And there were certain things that he needed to say from a sales perspective that he didn't really
comfortable saying in front of you.
He just didn't need me hearing. So, along around 2003, Corpo needed to offload some businesses and right size a little bit, I think is the right term here. And so they put Bass Trigon up for sale, and American Innovations had this product called the Bullhorn remote monitoring system.
Right.
And they thought it might make sense to take a PC, a compliance data management system, and marry it with a remote monitoring system. Kind of makes sense. And so we eventually got sold to American Innovations in 2003.
Yep.
Now, That's the Bass
Trigon.
Trigon.
/ Corpro piece.
So backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
So back in those late 80s, early 90s, that girlfriend of yours started
Yeah.
working in the same industry?
She did.
Yeah.
So there's a piece of the story there.
So as the software was growing, like I said, probably around 90-ish or so, so we had one developer, two salesmen here, and some of the clients were saying, can you take all this data we have on sheets and get it into this software?
Mm-hmm.
I said, sure. So we were looking for people that could sit down and type data in.
Yep.
And so this girl that I'd grown up with, that was married to my marketing department here, she was available and kind of looking for something to do, right?
Look, had
She
a
had
couple of little.
had a 6-year-old, had a 7-year-old at the time.
The kids were kind of getting into school, and she said, I can do that, right?
Absolutely.
So she worked for us probably 10 years or more, and probably until we started moving things to Denver or something like that.
I was going to say, because all the while you're doing all this Bass Trigon, you're still Bass.
Yeah.
Y'all are still at 3200 Brent Road.
Yes.
You're in a dark room downstairs.
There's Cindy. She first started doing data entry, and then she started training the clients, and then she happened to be an English teacher. So some of our clients want some stuff written down about how this thing works. Boy, So then she says, "Oh, I can write a manual."
Yeah.
So she went from data entry to manual writing and training.
Mm-hmm. So now she's on the plane with the PC, and you.
Yes.
She rode many a flight riding right seat. Because now I don't have to be there.
Right.
You got kicked out.
I'm out.
Yeah.
And so go back to your Bass engineering world and go play in the dirt, and we'll do the technical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so Cindy rode many a flight with Jim, getting her ground school.
Yeah.
And that she appreciates to this day, by the way.
Okay.
So she still flies commercial, and she's very tuned in to what the plane is doing.
Absolutely.
And it was very much a family event,
Right.
and made up a large part of her life was built around corrosion control and customer-facing activities.
So, again, while he's doing all that, what's going on in your world?
I'm back on the Bass engineering design, construction side of our world, and trying to build that side of the business, creating a technical services team, continuing to support our installation services, and make all of that go. So
how big? How many rigs, crews would you say Bass was running at that time?
When I started, we had we had multiple crews, but everyone was a jack of all trades, so they could transition between job activities very well, and that's a credit to Jim's dad, Calvin Bass, and Charles Eaton, his partner, and Jim's mom, Lillian Bass. So
who really ran the show, but she let the other two.
We all worked for Lillian, but she was kind enough to let us think that we had some role in the business.
Yeah.
And so it was very much a family mom and pop shop, but it was a great incubator for entrepreneurial thinking, just boots on the ground, learn it from the dirt up type environment, and again, just great experiences along the way. Exposure to software development, how that's tracked in the industry today, and just the business side of that, how the business is transferred through different hands at different times. That kind of leads us to where we're sitting today at here at AI World in Austin, Texas, an AI sponsored event.
Yeah.
So then Clay and my dad continued to grow Bass Engineering, and along around 2004, 2005, it was getting that, they were in their 70s. They were looking to actually retire.
Yeah.
And and not just work less. And so, it's kind of like, okay, so what do we do with the business?
Yeah.
And, I think we looked at things like, we could just keep operating it and let, Clay could run it and, or we could sell it to somebody. And we talked to a couple of companies, American Innovations being one of them, right?
Yeah, but that's a story in of itself too. And I mentioned that last night when talking with Jim and James was how that conversation happened between you and Rich and the opportunity that was Bass Engineering. It was very last minute, if I remember correctly.
Well, yeah, we were talking to another company,
Yeah.
and I guess because I was already working for Rich, and I think I just kind of casually mentioned. I can't remember how this went exactly. You may know the story better than I do, but
The way I've always heard it was,
you probably heard it from Rich.
and of course I know Jim, right?
Yes,
and
of
so
course.
Jim's pretty focused on programming, doing what he's doing, and so
Task at hand.
very much the task at
technical
hand.
task,
And then it occurred to him that, wait a minute, I have another partner in this business, and he's kind of in this buying businesses world. Maybe I should mention to him that we're trying to sell the family business. And so Rich's side of this was he was literally standing in a taxi line in Las Vegas, and he got a notification that Jim had at least told him, but he got a notification that Bass Engineering was for sale, and this was on a Friday, I think, and bids were due on Monday.
Correct.
And so Rich spent the entire weekend doing the valuations and coming up with pricing to put a bid in. And but in the end,
Lo and behold,
we
it happened.
We all came together, and so at that point, it's kind of a reunion for Jim and I because we've been apart for several years, although
Still in the same office.
still in the same building, but chasing different paths.
Right.
But now we're together again under one.
It was
umbrella.
Friday lunches was about all you guys had in common.
And well, I didn't get invited that often. Friday lunches for that group was Whataburger, and it was a bunch of developers, right?
Yeah.
Software developers. So what can I contribute to that conversation?
Yeah.
So
Back up just a couple of years when AI acquired Bass Trigon. I mean, we were very much in the mode of, a problem gets reported, we're going to fix it later that day. We're going to send out a new disc to the client, and everything's good. So AI had a little bit more structure, and but we weren't really aware of this structure. And so one of the very early things that happened, we decided we needed to have a users group meeting. So we had a users group meeting out at a place called Lakeway, and I think it's on Lake Travis. And we're at this users group, and in the morning, probably the night before, Russell Reed had made some changes to the Allegro software, and the next morning, Hamblin's passing out update discs to the clients, and the VP of development is like, what is going on here? We don't just pass out discs that haven't been tested. And I said, oh, no, it's okay. Russ tested it, and he said, no, we don't do things that way. And then a little bit later in the day, I'm giving a talk, and I thought it might be a good time to tell the clients that we're working on a brand new major version. And they're like, what? Again, the VP of development said, you haven't told me about this. I said, well, I didn't know I needed to, I just did. This is what I do. We develop software, and so anyway, for the better, AI brought some structure to us as far as QA and as far as planning the next version.
Roadmaps.
Yes, roadmaps, and the product did very well for the next 10, 15 years with Hamblin out making promises. He would once he got to where he could fly on his own and do demos without any help, he would go out and do a demo to a major pipeline company, and he would come back and say, Bass, PCS does such and such, right? And I said, no, it really doesn't, Steve. He goes, well, it seems like it should. I just told XYZ major pipeline company that it did it, and they're going to buy it. And I was like, this happened over and over. But the development team would go to work and we would make it do something pretty close to what Hamblin had, promised. And, over a period of 10 years, the product grew a lot in functionality because of Hamblin's random promises that he would make to prospective clients.
And it's I guess you could call that somewhat of a mobile users group. He's out getting that feedback.
That's true.
That we now have every year here, but he's going to get it and saying, of course we'll do that. Or it does that already.
It does it. He would say it does it already.
Right. Okay.
And I think maybe sometimes he had an idea it maybe didn't do it.
Yeah.
But this was just his method of getting me to do it. So
successful Steve.
And then on the Bass engineering side, I would imagine AI brought some structure and business practices that helped Bass grow significantly after that acquisition.
What did you know about running a business in 2005?
Absolutely. I knew everything I needed to know. And, typical, 35-year-old, whatever I was at the time, is absolutely, I'm perfectly qualified.
By the way,
to do
you
this.
said you were 35 in 05.
Well, maybe not so good
45.
with the math there.
We've got some talking to do.
Maybe 45.
Maybe 45, 47-ish. Well, let's go with 47. A little quick math there. And but nonetheless, you learn on the fly. And so American Innovations was wonderful to bring leadership training and structure and budgeting and all those things that Jim mentioned about the structure of running a business behind the scenes. So just invaluable time, 15 years, 16, 17 years with American Innovations was a wonderful run for Bass Engineering Company. And
17 years with them, and then this would, we've been a part of Users Group, or Bass has been a part of Users Group now for almost all of that. So much so, and I forget what year it was where we had our own designated track of, pure cathodic protection, field data collection, CP design, you name it.
Right.
We were given our own track to take and run, and like you said, it's been, I would like to think, pretty invaluable for Bass. We wouldn't be where we are today.
Absolutely. So a really great run with American Innovations, and then led in as you mentioned earlier, in 2022, the sale to Mesa. And but again, so much of this is just a book. It's a story. It's a chapter by chapter by chapter version of a life of a business, and it has it continues to this day, and it's just a new chapter. And look forward to what it can do. I know Jim can look at the product today and remember how it started, and then look at where it is now, and probably think, oh my goodness, I didn't quite have this whole vision. I had a vision, but it wasn't quite this vision. And the same is true for Bass Engineering. So it's been a great run, and look forward to a lot more good things to come.
So in typical fashion of Jim and James here, if there was some advice that you two guys, because I know you're coming up on retirement here pretty soon, and Jim's enjoying retirement as we speak, what advice would you guys give to some of the younger folks that are just now entering this industry?
I would say, so for the technical people, the developers and the, trainers and everybody involved with PCS, I would say, what kind of built PCS was listening to the clients. Listen, understand what they want, and then, show them how you can offer them a solution for their pain points in dealing with their data collection, et cetera. So just listen to what the client says.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's embrace the uncertainty that comes with it. Whether you work in a small service company, whether you work for one of the large majors, there's uncertainty in our world. There's uncertainty in our industry, but we have a job to do, and so embrace the uncertainty, but go after your job. Go after be where your boots are.
Yeah.
Adam,
Don't be afraid of the uncertainty.
and don't be afraid. Just embrace it
Yeah.
and let it become a part of your life. Let that energy drive you to be good at what you do. Engage in it. Don't be afraid of it. Don't try to hold it at arm's length. Get in the mud, the blood, and the beer. Do what
Ask
you
the
have to
question.
do to understand as much as you can. This is a wonderful, and it's probably one of the most open, friendly industries that exists, and people helping people. And if you embrace that and engage in that, you'll find it's a wonderful community to work in.
Cool. Well, with that, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right,
This was fun.
you got it. Thanks for setting it up.
See y'all.